Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
12 years old, weighed down by his magnificent golden crown and his august regnal name, Sayyid Sibkatullah Shah al-Rashidi II, the sixth Peer of Pagaro, ascended to the throne. 2 decades later, in 1942, the Peer's anger, fanned by the spirit of the freedom movement, led his Hur clansmen to set the desert on fire. Trains were attacked and canal dikes were bombed. The Nazim of the Khairpur police, hated for having seduced the wife of one of the Peer's men, was hacked to pieces. To crush the rebellion, historian Aftab Nabi writes, the British Indian Army sent in elite forces backed by air power. Like in all colonial counterinsurgency, the rage of the Raj was savage. Frontier Force soldier Alistair McKeith later recalled using traditional camel trackers or puggies to detect the location of the attackers and then dynamite their entire villages. Fleeing villagers were strafed from the air. The Peer was hanged in 1943 and secretly buried on the island of Astola. The location was especially picked since there was no fresh water on the island. The Peer had only scorpions and snakes to guard his bones. Earlier this week, the distant descendants of those Hur rebels, gangs of dacoits operating in the Badlands between the Koh-e-Suleiman Mountains, the Indus and the Cholistan Desert, ambushed and killed 12 police officers. The bandits have been resurgent for over a year, burning down the crops of the rich, kidnapping the wealthy, and storming and looting entire villages. The government has tried using military force and the police to stamp out the bandits since at least 2016, but with very little success. The persistence and power of the Indus bandits brings to light an important question about the structure of Pakistan, which is today at the risk of a profound unraveling into anarchy. Even though similar bands once ruled large swathes of India, as political scientist Yogesh Kumar has written, changes in the structure of the rural economy, political life, and the deepening reach of the nation-state itself erase this large-scale banditry. Pakistan's failure to eliminate violence from its heartlands at the junction of Punjab, Balochistan, and Sindh reveals the nation-state's fragility. And it raises serious questions about the country's fight to take on larger threats like terrorism. After all, if it can't even take on bandits, what's it going to do about insurgencies? Fighting for election from the key seat of Hadipur while facing a rising tide of support for the then newly formed Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz candidate Bawar Nawaz presented his winning argument to the voters. I come from a family of robbers and dacoits. This is not a joke but a fact, he said. We have been doing this for years and we will continue doing this till death. The language was mocked in urban Punjab. To his supporters, though, the politician was laying claim to a centuries-old tradition which represents resistance to feudalism through the gun and the sharing of wealth robbed from the rich. The decade between 1984 and 94, the first half of which saw power consolidate under military ruler General Muhammad Zia-ul Haq, witnessed the sunrise of bandit empires. These empires were unprecedented in their scale, the scholar Imdad Hussain Sahito has recorded in the only thoroughgoing work on this topic. According to Sahito, in 1986, dacoits even overran Sukur Central Prison, freeing 34 bandits on death row, each of whom went on to set up new gangs. From Sahito's work, it's clear the bandits drew on large numbers of clan groups like the Chandio, the Khosas, and the Jatoi. Elements of these groups had practiced banditry since the Mughal era and before. The historian Nazir Aziz Anjum has recorded that even Mughal power proved unable to stamp out threats to trade caravans traversing Sindh, forcing many big merchants to hire private armies of their own. The Mughals, when things got out of hand, sometimes unleashed barbaric violence to crush the bandits. The colonial traveller Peter Mundy recorded having seen over 200 minarets bearing the heads of thieves, which were covered over with mortar and plaster. But it had little effect in the absence of state institutions that could ensure order and engage with mutinous communities. Local officials were sometimes fined to make up losses suffered by traders to bandits. That was simply cheaper than maintaining a big force. The easy availability of modern weapons after the jihad in Afghanistan increased the lethality of the bandits significantly, Sahito notes. In 1987, a former officer from Pakistan's military, Tahir Nakash, began supplying modern military training to bandits. Factories to repair their weapons and stores for their ordnance, various contemporary accounts suggest, cropped up around this time. Like the Mughals and the British before, General Zia's state sought to crush the bandits. Late one night in 1983, the charismatic bandit leader Muhammad Paryal Chandio was brought to Shah Panjo railway station, an inconsequential stop along the line from Karachi to Quetta, and shot through the back of his head. His gang members Ali Gohar Chandio and Ghulam Nabi Chandio were executed in similar fake encounters very soon afterwards. From just days after the killing though, mourners carrying hand-woven ajrak shawls began appearing at Paryal's grave to offer their respects. The slain bandit became remembered as a kind of protector saint of the poor. There was even a hit film made about his life, which General Zia tried to have banned with not a great deal of success. From the accounts of the marauders that Sahito interviewed, the freewheeling mores of the bandits stood at some distance from the conservative middle-class values of Pakistan. I quote, "Each dacoit vied to array his boyfriend in expensive clothes," Sahito writes, "with Rado watches, gold rings, necklaces, and so on. These boys were not allowed to sit in the company of the other dacoits and sometimes became the cause of gun battles among them. In some cases, bandit commanders would ensure their lovers' names were included in police records to ensure they could not leave them. This kind of concubinage, Jan Willem de Lind van Wijngaarden and Bushra Rani have written, was common across Pakistan and Afghanistan and sometimes served as a means for young men from poor homes to gain some degree of economic mobility. Efforts by Islamists and the state to stamp out the practice had only marginal success. Even though pederasty was commonplace in the bandit milieu, more conventional relationships also existed. Wives would sometimes visit their husbands in the forests, while many bandits kept local mistresses. Large-scale rape, sadly, routinely accompanied bandit attacks on enemy villages. The bandits also cast themselves as protectors of local cultural tradition. Folk singer Imam Baksh Zardari, for example, was once paid generously by Paryal for a single performance at a Sufi saint's shrine, where thousands turned out to listen. Local and foreign videos about crime and sex were very popular among the bandits, just as they were in the community as a whole. The bandits would often entertain themselves by playing the fife, guitar, and Sindhi harp. Gangs would sometimes compete in playing chopad, a game in which one person plays a bear and the others play the hunting dogs. A kind of hide and seek, if you like. These kinds of public, festive, cultural engagements were not without risk. On the 1st of August 1985, the gang of Ali Gohar Deprani passed through the village of Fakir Jan Muhammad Burido, where the marriage of a petty landlord Ghulam Haidar Chana was being solemnized, Sahito has recorded. The popular singer Gajan Ode had come to sing at the festivities, and before he started, the dacoits asked him to sing some of their favorite numbers, which they wanted to record so they could listen to them whenever they wanted. In the meanwhile, the police arrived, which resulted in a bloody encounter lasting for several hours. Even though the bandits serve no stated ideological cause, it's impossible not to read them against other movements fighting for space in the same physical terrain. The jihadist movements of southern Punjab, such as the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, or the far-right anti-Shia Sipah-Sahiba Pakistan, were competing mobilizations. Fortunately, the scholar Aisha Siddiqa notes in a brilliant essay on the religious right in southern Punjab, they have not succeeded in changing the lifestyles of ordinary people. This is perhaps because there are multiple cultural strands that do not allow the jihadis to impose their norms. The bandits, however inchoate, thus represented a strain of resistance not only to the state but also to fundamentalism. Ever since 2016, the Pakistani state became increasingly convinced that the bandits were allying with groups like the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, bartering safe havens in the Badlands in return for modern weapons and tactical training. Though actual evidence of this argument remains somewhat thin, the concerns were driven by fears over Chinese-funded infrastructure projects in Pakistan's heartland. In 2005, bandits kidnapped 12 Chinese engineers, though they were eventually released without ransom after intervention from elders of the Mazari tribe. In 2016, Pakistan's armed forces deployed helicopter gunships to hunt down Ghulam Rasool Chotu, a one-time waiter at a hotel in Kashmir who'd become the leader of a 300-strong band. The police ended up losing some 7 police officers, with 24 held hostage, for just 2 bandits killed. Ghulam Rasool eventually surrendered to the army, but it's had little long-term impact on banditry in the area. As we've seen, kidnappings and extortion continue. Among the kidnapped recently was 72-year-old businessman Mukhi Jagdish Kumar, who said his captors kept him in chains, but politely ensured he was offered vegetarian food. The use of the sledgehammer to squash the mosquito returned last year, with police launching operations involving armored personnel carriers, drones and heavy machine guns that are reputed to claim the lives of 278 bandits. Even though the massive use of force might seem spectacular, it's done little to degrade banditry. In India, the rise of new political forces which represented marginal communities and the ability of the system to accommodate claims by new contenders to power eventually brought stability to once violent-torn regions like Bundelkhand, the Chambal Valley and even Karnataka. The force is necessary to confront violence and contain it. Ensuring peace has to come about through politics. The slaughter now again playing out on the industry illustrates a lesson English counterinsurgency learned the hard way. Force can win wars, but it can't ensure peace. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.